Hello and welcome to another real-time service video. This time we're focusing on air springs. In the past we've done really in-depth videos on lower leg services. So if this is all a bit of a dark art to you, click here for Doddy's video. It's a really in-depth how-to and a great way to familiarise yourself with what is quite a basic service. Today though, we're going to be focusing on our air springs. Now, air springs are basically to replace what you might think inside your fork, the spring itself, with just an air chamber that's pressurized. This is not only very light, but very adjustable, so it's perfect for mountain biking. Now, a couple of things you're going to need before we even start this service. Big thing you'll need is some circlip pliers. These are to basically remove the air spring from the lower of the fork. Also, you can use a valve tool here, which is very useful, and some bits that you don't technically need, but they are very useful if you want to do the extra layer, and that is a 12mm spanner and an 8mm Allen key. In regards to grease, you can use the dynamic seal grease from SRAM or just something like the butter or similar. They do recommend this for the inner workings of their shocks and forks, but to be honest, both will do a perfectly decent job. And as always, Mr. Blue Towel, just to keep things clean. So first things first is we need to remove our valve core from the top of the fork, let all the pressure out, make a note, take it out, and away you go, and put it somewhere safe. You can probably get away with doing it by holding it down, etc, etc, but I think it's not only easier but safer to do it removed entirely out the way. You know, you're taking apart some stuff that can hold really high pressures of air, and yeah, it's not to be messed around with. That stuff can be pretty sketchy if you take something apart that is even remotely charged. So yeah, be careful. Now, first things first, we're going to get our circlip pliers, which might not be part of the bread and butter of a lot of toolboxes, but they're certainly useful, especially for suspension. You can use 2 picks, I suppose, but this will make it far easier. Now, at the bottom of our air spring, we have this retaining clip here, which we're going to get at with these. So, forcing down nice and evenly, and it comes up like so. Now, this service we're doing is a great little add-on for a lower leg and will really help increase the performance of your fork. A lot of focus is on these seals here, these wiper seals, and how they might reduce friction, but the inner diameter is quite large too, and having that big air spring, it needs to be lubed, it needs to be sure it's nice and light in terms of action. Also, this is the part that you replace if you want to change the travel of your forks, so it's worth bearing in mind. Now, what we've got to do here, we've emptied the positive air chamber, and it definitely is empty because there's the valve core, but the negative might still be charged. So as we're going to pull this off, there might indeed be a little bit of a pop. So please don't do it. It's like the old cartoon, the guy looking down the barrel of the gun, but maybe do it away from you. Pop. Hey presto. And there we have it. If you took out this top assembly here, where your volume spacers sit, you would be able to see straight down the fork there. It's really as simple as that. So the way it sits is here is where your positive air chamber is. It equalizes as the fork's got a little notch inside there to fill your negative. Now, negative air chambers are a real big buzzword in mountain biking at the moment. And here isn't the stock assembly. Normally, it comes with this spacer just inside. Now this is a top out spacer. It means that as your fork reaches full extension, it doesn't make any noise, it's nice and smooth. However, if you want to, a nice little trick you can do if you're running pikes such as these, or even later generations of RockShox forks in general, is you can remove this, which increases the volume of your negative air, which will help a more fluttery stroke all through the travel. So that's a nice little tip. It's not something you have to do, but I mean, to be honest, the forks are very active anywhere in their stroke anyway, but yeah, it's a nice little trick. And if you want to remove that, you can just put 8mm in there, a spanner on the end there, and away you go. That does take a small amount of retaining compound on what is a very finely pitched thread, but yeah, it's worth doing. So we're just gonna pinch that off. And that whole assembly can slide off there. This is where you would then remove the bottom out spacer or install it, depending how you're going. And what I'm going to do, it's because why not? Why not make it as good as it can be? And I'm just going to use SRAM butter just for simplicity's sake. Just a little bit of grease, make sure it's clean before you go in. And you can get special tools that will allow you to grease this more effectively. It's like a little, almost like a bullet that's shaped on the end, which is absolutely lovely. But, you know, you can do this at home very easily, just like I'm doing here. I'm just gonna make sure our finger's nice and clean. Slide that on with the obviously correct orientation. The writing should be at the bottom. And this is gonna be really similar, no matter if you're running Fox or whatever. It's a very similar thing. Like I said, this is the piece that you need to change should you want to change the travel of your fork in the latest kind of generations. Yeah, so just bear that in mind. It's real simple service, like I said. And on some forks like Suntours, they use spacers which clip onto this leg, but largely the same thing. Now, like I was also saying earlier on, you know, sometimes they do use retaining compounds on there. I kind of get my forks apart quite regularly, so for me it's not such an issue. But if you're a set and forget sort of person, then maybe that's worth doing. Just nipped up nice and firmly there. If you've got a torque wrench, you may want to check the manufacturer's guide on the website. But I think we'll be pretty good there. And there we have it. So that's that nice seal lubed up there. It definitely feels pretty light. And we're going to just then lube up this seal here. They go quite firm. Sometimes these come so over lubed, like a very generous helping of grease from brand new. And what that means is sometimes the equalizing port, which sits in the fork there, gets blocked by grease. And that means that sometimes the negative air chamber can become overcharged and it can't get back into the positive. That's when your forks stick down. So if that's the case, then this is the service you need to do. Although when you're pulling that out, sometimes there can be a real big pop. So it's worth maybe covering it with a bit of rag or similar. Next, I'm actually just gonna hold this up to the light here, shine it down. Now, light is a really useful tool as a way of inspecting to make sure there are no nicks or scratches. You know, from there shouldn't be anything much, but it's a good habit to get into. Always inspect your stuff for wear. As you do that, you're going to become more familiar with what it should look like, more familiar with tolerances and things like that. So it is definitely worth doing. And then holding it nice and firm, trying to get it in. There we go. Then this bit is really important, because if this circlip isn't installed correctly, then you're going to be in a world of bother, really, aren't you? So we're going to make sure that's nice and seated. There's a definite snap. We're just going to remove the excess grease there. This will aid us in terms of visual inspection. And there's definitely a defined slot for this circlip to sit into. So we get it there. We're going to come up with our fingers, hold it in place, hold it down, and as simple as that. That's installed very nicely. And make sure it's all the way seated round, it's nice and flat, it's parallel with the top there. If it's at a slant, it's not in properly. And like I said, that could go a bit wrong. So then very simply, we're going to reinstall this valve core, making sure it's clean. I'm just going to be a bit naughty. It's like hummus at a dinner party, like double dipping. Politics, man. So we're going to put that in there. The reason I actually like to lube those seals is it just reduces any sort of micro tears it could get. And, you know, it's covering the bases, really. So there we have it. Now, as we inflate this positive air chamber, it's going to make this leg come out back to where it was. Now, a really good guide for air springs, there is a thing called bushing overlap, which is basically how far your lowers and your fork legs kind of mesh together and how deep they sit within there, which is obviously really important. But another visual guide you can do is if your air leg is longer than your damper, so it's way out here, then what happens is as it comes to the top of its stroke, it's actually going to be pulling apart that damper. So it can cause some serious damage to your bike. And when we do change the length of our forks, that's one thing we really, really need to watch out for. So we always want to make sure, even when they're at full extension, the damper is just a little bit longer than the air leg there, the air shaft. But that's pretty much it. And you'll be amazed at how much difference that will make. And it only takes just a few minutes to do. Now, is this something you do all the time? Let us know in the comments below. As always, please don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you want to see the other real-time service we've done, which is where we took apart a rear RockShox shock, then click down here. It's a bit of good fun, bit of waffle, this kind of me just yammering on, and hopefully able to include some tips and tricks that maybe you didn't think of. Awesome, thanks for watching, guys.